The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty road as 10-year-old Emma Yoder clutched her father's silver coin so tightly it left an impression on her small palm. The coin was warm now, heated by her constant touch during the hour-long buggy ride to the marketplace in Lancaster. Her mother, Sarah, sat beside her in the black buggy, silent as she had been for the 3 months since Papa died. Emma watched the countryside roll past, endless fields of green corn, white farmhouses with their perfect gardens, and horses pulling plows in straight, unwavering lines. Everything in their Amish world was orderly, predictable, safe. Everything except the hollow space Papa had left behind.
"Mama," Emma whispered, breaking the silence that felt as heavy as the humid August air.
"Do you think Papa can see us from heaven?" Sarah's hands tightened on the reins, her knuckles turning white against her black dress. "Ja, child. God willing, he watches over us still." Emma studied her mother's profile. The same gentle features that once smiled so easily now seemed carved from stone. The accident had taken more than Papa. It had taken Mama's light too. 3 months since the barn raising, 3 months since the beam fell, 3 months since everything changed. The silver coin in Emma's hand had been Papa's last gift, pressed into her palm the morning of that terrible day. "For something special," he had said, his beard tickling her cheek as he kissed her goodbye. "Something that speaks to your heart, little one." She had saved it, waiting for that special something. Today, Mama said they needed supplies: flour, sugar, fabric for winter dresses. Practical things, but Emma kept the coin hidden in her apron pocket, unable to part with the last physical piece of her father's love. The marketplace came into view as they crested the hill, a sprawling collection of wooden stalls and canvas tents where Amish, Mennonite and English folk gathered to trade. The air filled with the sounds of commerce, bleating sheep, haggling voices, the clatter of horseshoes on cobblestones, and the distant call of the auctioneer. Sarah guided their horse to the hitching post near the fabric merchant. "Stay close, Emma. The marketplace is no place for wandering." But Emma's attention had already been captured by something unusual in the far corner of the market square. A crowd had gathered near the livestock pens, but the sounds coming from that direction weren't the normal auction calls. There was something darker in the murmurs, something that made the hair on Emma's arms stand up despite the summer heat. "I'll be quick with my shopping," Sarah said, stepping down from the buggy. "Mind you stay where I can see you." Emma nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the distant crowd. She helped her mother gather the shopping baskets, but her curiosity burned like a flame. What could draw such a crowd? What could cause those hushed, almost fearful voices? 20 minutes passed. Sarah moved methodically through her purchases, selecting flour with the same careful consideration she gave everything since Papa died. Everything was measured, controlled, empty of joy. Emma followed dutifully, carrying packages, but her gaze kept drifting to that mysterious gathering. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong in any marketplace. A low animal moan of pain or despair, she couldn't tell which. It came from the direction of the crowd, carried on the summer breeze like a ghost's whisper. "Mama, I need to use the outhouse," Emma said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. But the pull toward that sound was irresistible, as if Papa himself was guiding her feet. Sarah barely looked up from examining a bolt of dark blue fabric. "Be quick, and don't speak to strangers." Emma hurried away, her small feet carrying her through the maze of market stalls. The crowd grew larger as she approached, a mix of Amish men in their black hats, Mennonite families, and English tourists with their cameras and curious stares. They formed a circle around something, their voices creating a wall of sound. "Shameful, absolutely shameful," said an elderly Amish woman, shaking her head. "Bishop Eli says it's God's justice," added another, clicking her tongue. "A monster, that's what he is, better off dead than." Emma pushed through the forest of legs and long skirts, driven by something she couldn't name. The crowd was thick, but she was small and determined. She squeezed between bodies, ignoring the disapproving clucks and mutters, until she broke through to the inner circle. What she saw made her heart stop. In the center of the circle, chained to a wooden post like an animal, was the largest man Emma had ever seen. He had to be over 6 feet tall, with shoulders as broad as Papa's workbench and arms thick as fence posts. But it wasn't his size that made Emma gasp. It was the rough burlap sack tied over his head, with only small holes cut for breathing. The sack was stained with sweat and what might have been tears, and the man's massive frame was bent, as if trying to fold in on itself and disappear. His clothes were torn and filthy, his feet bare and bleeding. Iron shackles bound his wrists and ankles, connected by chains that rattled with every small movement. He knelt in the dirt, his whole body trembling. Standing beside him was Peter Stoltzfors, a farmer Emma knew from neighboring district. He held a wooden sign that read, "Indentured servant, 7 years labor, make an offer." What did he do? Someone in the crowd asked. Peter's face was hard as flint. You know what he did. Everyone knows what Jacob Miller done. Killed a child with his drunk driving, then ran from the law. Bishop Eli himself declared him shunned, and the English judge gave him a choice, 20 years in their prison or 7 years of servitude to whoever would take him. This is mercy, more than he deserves. Jacob Miller. Emma knew that name. Everyone in the Amish community knew it. 6 months ago, before Papa died, she remembered the adults talking in hushed voices about Jacob Miller, the Amish man who had left the community years ago, got involved with English ways, with alcohol and fast cars. The accident had killed a 5-year-old English boy. Jacob had fled but was caught. The man under the sack let out another low moan, and Emma saw his shoulders shake with silent sobs. $500, called out an Englishman in a business suit. 7 years of free labor is worth that. 300, countered another. Look at him. He's broken. Probably can't work a full day. Peter shook his head. This ain't an auction for profit. Bishop Eli wants him with good Amish folk who'll work him hard and keep him humble, teach him what he forgot about our ways. I'll take him, said Amos Beachy, a farmer known for his harsh treatment of animals and harder treatment of hired help. I'll give you $200 and work the sin right out of him. My fields need plowing, and my barn needs mucking. He'll earn his keep and then... Emma watched as Jacob's whole body seemed to collapse further, if that was possible. Through the burlap sack, she could hear him breathing, rapid, panicked breaths, like a trapped animal. Something stirred in Emma's chest. She remembered her father's voice. Emma, my girl, when you see someone broken, that's when they need kindness most. Don't ever turn away from suffering. Her hand moved to her pocket, fingers closing around the silver coin. It was worth about $50, nowhere near enough to match the other bids. But she thought of Papa, of how he would help anyone who needed it, even those the community shunned. I bid 1 silver coin, Emma's small voice rang out clear in the marketplace air. The crowd fell silent, heads turned. Eyes found the small Amish girl, in her purple dress and white cap, standing with her hand raised high. Peter Stoltzfors's eyebrows rose. Child, this is no game. Go back to your mother. I bid 1 silver coin, Emma repeated, louder now. She stepped forward, pulling the coin from her pocket. The sunlight caught it, making it shine like a tiny sun. My papa gave it to me, for something special, for something that speaks to my heart. Emma Yoder, her mother's voice cut through the crowd like a knife. Sarah pushed through the people, her face pale with shock and anger. What are you doing? But Emma didn't lower her hand. She looked at the giant man with the sack on his head, saw how he had turned slightly toward her voice, how his breathing had changed. Mama, I want to buy him. I want to help him. The marketplace erupted in scandalized whispers. An Amish child trying to purchase an indentured servant, a shunned murderer. It was unthinkable. Sarah grabbed Emma's arm. Absolutely not. This man is dangerous. He killed a child, Emma. He's being punished for terrible sins. But Papa always said, Your papa is gone. Sarah's voice cracked, revealing the well of pain beneath her controlled exterior. And you will not dishonor his memory by spending his final gift on this. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but she didn't lower her hand. Papa said when someone is broken, that's when they need kindness most. This man is broken, Mama. I can feel it. Amos Beachy laughed, a cruel sound. The child has lost her senses. Sarah, take her home. But Bishop Eli had appeared at the edge of the crowd, his long white beard and stern presence silencing everyone. He walked forward slowly, his cane tapping on the ground, his eyes moving from Emma to the man in the sack, then to Peter Stoltzfus. What is the meaning of this? The bishop asked. Peter explained quickly, his voice respectful. The child bid 1 silver coin for Jacob Miller's indenture, Bishop. Obviously it's not a serious offer. Bishop Eli studied Emma for a long moment. His eyes, deep-set and wise, seemed to look into her very soul. Emma Yoder, daughter of Daniel Yoder. Why do you wish to purchase this man's service? Emma's voice trembled, but held steady. Because no one else wants him, Bishop Eli. Because everyone looks at him with hate. But Jesus taught us to love even those who sin. Because my papa said to help the broken ones. Your father was a good man, the bishop said softly. Then, louder. But this man is shunned. To help him is to go against the ordinum, against our community's decision. The ordinum says we shun to bring them back. Emma said, surprising even herself with the words. She had heard Papa discuss such things with Mama late at night. How can he come back if no one shows him the way? If no one shows him God's love? The crowd murmured. Some nodded slowly. Others looked outraged. Jacob Miller had gone completely still under his sack, as if afraid to breathe, afraid to hope. Bishop Eli's expression remained unreadable. He turned to Amos Beachy. You offered $200. Ja, Bishop. For 7 years of labor, it's more than fair. Then the bishop turned to Emma. And you offer 1 silver coin. Ja, Bishop. It's all I have, but I offer it with love. The silence stretched so long Emma thought she might faint from holding her breath. Then Bishop Eli did something no one expected. He smiled, just a slight upturn of his lips beneath his beard. The Bible tells us that the widow's mite was worth more than the rich man's gold, he said slowly, because she gave all she had. He paused, looking around at the crowd. Perhaps God speaks through children, because we adults have forgotten how to listen. He turned to Peter Stoltzfus. Give the girl the papers. The marketplace erupted in shock and protest. Amos Beachy's face turned red. Bishop, this is madness. The child can't. The child made an offer from her heart. Bishop Eli interrupted, his voice firm with authority. And sometimes that is worth more than gold. The girl's mother is widowed. Her farm needs help. Perhaps this arrangement serves God's purpose. He looked at Sarah. Sarah Yoder, your daughter has spoken with the wisdom of innocence. Will you accept this man's service? Sarah looked torn, her face a battlefield of emotions. Emma tugged on her sleeve. Please, Mama. Please. Finally, Sarah's shoulders sagged in defeat or acceptance. Emma couldn't tell which. If it is the bishop's will, it is done, Bishop Eli declared. The child's bid is accepted. Peter Stoltzfus shook his head in disbelief, but handed the papers to Sarah. Emma rushed forward and placed her silver coin in his palm. It looked so small, so insignificant, but to Emma, it held all the love her father had given her. The crowd began to disperse, some grumbling about blasphemy, others whispering about miracles. Emma approached Jacob Miller slowly. Up close she could see his hands, huge and rough, but trembling like leaves in wind. The sack over his head moved with his breathing. Hello, Emma said softly. My name is Emma. Emma Yoder. I'm 10 years old. You're going to come home with us now. A sound came from under the sack. Half sob, half something else. Relief, maybe. Or disbelief. Sarah approached, her voice cold. You will work our farm. You will sleep in the barn. You will not speak unless spoken to. And you will stay far from my daughter. Do you understand?" A muffled jar came from beneath the sack. Peter Stoltzfus unlocked the chains, and Jacob stood all 6.5 feet of him. He towered over everyone, a giant with a sack for a face, but he moved like a man defeated, his head bowed, his movements careful as if afraid his very existence might cause harm. Emma took her mother's hand on one side, and without thinking, reached out toward Jacob's massive, trembling hand on the other. "Don't!" Sarah pulled Emma back sharply. "Never touch him, Emma. Never forget what he is." Jacob's hand dropped to his side, the brief moment of connection lost. But Emma had felt something in that second. Not danger, not evil, just overwhelming sadness, deeper than any well. As they walked toward their buggy, Emma turned back once. The marketplace was returning to normal, but she could still see the impression in the dirt where Jacob had knelt. The marks of his chains, the place where everything had changed. She didn't know it then, but that one silver coin, her father's final gift, had just purchased more than an indentured servant. It had purchased a chance at redemption, at forgiveness, at healing, and the cost would be higher than any of them could imagine. The giant man with the sack on his head followed them like a shadow, silent and broken. But Emma Yoder, with the faith and wisdom of a child, believed that even shadows could be healed by the right kind of light. The ride home was suffocating in its silence. Jacob Miller sat in the back of the buggy, his large frame folded uncomfortably in the small space, the burlap sack still tied firmly over his head. Emma kept stealing glances at him, watching how his shoulders hunched, as if trying to make himself smaller, invisible. It seemed impossible that someone so large could try so hard to disappear. Sarah drove with rigid precision, her jaw set, eyes fixed on the road ahead. The only sounds were the clip-clop of the horse's hooves, and the occasional creak of the buggy wheels. Emma wanted to say something, anything to break the terrible quiet, but every time she opened her mouth, her mother's sharp glance silenced her. The Yoder farm appeared as they rounded the bend, 70 acres of land that had been in Papa's family for 4 generations. The white farmhouse stood proud against the summer sky, but Emma noticed how the paint was peeling, how the garden had more weeds than vegetables, how the fields looked less abundant than they had when Papa was alive. 3 months was a long time for a widow and a child to manage alone. Sarah pulled the buggy to a stop near the barn. "Get down," she ordered Jacob, her voice flat and cold. Jacob moved slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter something. When he stood, his full height was even more impressive, or intimidating, depending on how one looked at it. He stood with his head bowed, waiting. "The barn," Sarah continued, pointing. "There's a stall at the back, away from the animals. You'll sleep there. There's a well behind the house for washing. You will work from sunup to sundown. You will eat after we've eaten. You will not enter the house. You will not speak to my daughter. Is that understood?" "Yeah," came the muffled response from under the sack. "Mama, shouldn't we?" Emma began. "Emma, go inside, now." Emma's protest died on her lips at the look in her mother's eyes. She walked slowly toward the house, but stopped at the porch, watching as Sarah led Jacob to the barn. The giant man moved with his head down, his bare feet leaving bloody prints in the dust. Emma's heart ached at the sight. Inside the house, everything was exactly as it had been that morning, except now it felt different, changed. Emma went to her room, a simple space with a bed covered in a quilt her grandmother had made, a wooden chest for clothes, and a small window overlooking the fields. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the barn. What was Jacob doing in there? Was he scared, hungry, in pain? The question swirled in her mind like leaves in autumn wind. That night at supper, it was just Emma and Sarah, as it had been for 3 months. But now there was a third presence, the shadow of the man in the barn, the elephant in the room that neither spoke about. Emma pushed her chicken and dumplings around her plate. Mama, shouldn't we take him some food? He can wait until we're finished. But Mama, Emma, Sarah's hand slammed on the table, making the dishes jump. Her eyes were fierce, wet with unshed tears. Do you understand what you've done? That man killed a child, a 5-year-old boy, Emma, the same age as the Fishers' little Samuel. He was drunk, driving one of those English cars, and he ran that child down and drove away like a coward. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I know, Mama. I know it was terrible. But nothing, Sarah's voice cracked. I've already lost your father. I won't risk losing you too. That man is dangerous. He's broken in ways we can't fix. The only reason he's here instead of prison is because I couldn't say no to Bishop Eli, and I couldn't break your heart after everything. They sat in heavy silence. Then Emma spoke, her voice small but clear. Papa used to say that hurt people, but loved people love people. Maybe Jacob needs someone to love him so he can remember how to love himself. Sarah closed her eyes, a single tear escaping down her cheek. Your papa saw the best in everyone, and look where it got him, dead at 42, leaving us alone. Mama, Papa's death wasn't because he was good. It was an accident. The beam just fell. Go to your room, Emma. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to make her mother understand, but she saw the pain etched in every line of Sarah's face and knew she couldn't push further. She stood, but before leaving she wrapped leftover chicken and bread in a cloth napkin. I said go to your room. I am, Mama. I just want to take him some food first. Please. Sarah stared at her daughter for a long moment, then looked away. 5 minutes. Then straight to bed. And don't get close to him. Emma hurried out before her mother could change her mind. The evening air was cooling, cicadas singing their summer song. The barn loomed dark against the purple sky. Emma pushed open the heavy door, the smell of hay and animals familiar and comforting. Jacob, she called softly. I brought you some food. Silence, then a rustling from the back stall. Emma walked carefully through the barn, past the milk cow, Bessie, past the empty horse stalls that once held Papa's workhorses, sold now to pay bills. At the very back, in a stall that used to store equipment, she found Jacob sat in the corner on bare straw, his knees pulled up to his chest, an impossible position for someone so large. The burlap sack was still on his head. His massive hands were clasped together, and Emma realized with a start that he was praying, his lips moving silently beneath the rough fabric. Jacob, she said again, gentler this time. He froze, then slowly lowered his hands. You shouldn't be here, child. His voice was deep, rough from disuse, but Emma heard the pain in it, the shame that colored every word. I brought you supper. She set the wrapped food on an overturned bucket near him, keeping her distance as Mama had ordered. There's chicken and dumplings, some bread, and I snuck an extra piece of choufle pie. Why? The question came out like a sob. Why would you, after what I'd done? Emma sat down on the straw, several feet away from him. Because everyone deserves to eat, and because I think my papa would want me to. Your papa, Daniel Yoder. I knew him. Jacob's voice caught. Good man. Best man I ever knew. When I was young, before I left, he tried to help me, tried to keep me from going to the English world. I didn't listen. You knew my papa. We were boys together. He was always kind, always saw the good in people, even when there wasn't none to see. Jacob's shoulders shook. I heard about the accident, about the barn raising. I'm sorry for your loss. Your papa didn't deserve. No one deserved. He couldn't finish. Emma saw wetness seeping through the burlap sack where his eyes would be. What happened to you, Jacob? Why did you leave our community? A long silence. Then, I was angry. My dad was strict, hard, never satisfied with nothing I did. When I turned 18, I left, went to Philadelphia, got a job at a construction site, started drinking, Drinking led to other things. 10 years I was gone. 10 years of sin piling up like dirty snow. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Then that night, that terrible night, I was drunk, thought I could drive. There was a bicycle, a child on it. I didn't see him until it was too late. The sound, God forgive me, the sound of the impact. Emma's heart clenched. She could hear the genuine anguish in his voice, the torment that went beyond any physical punishment. Did you mean to hurt him? No, never, but intention doesn't matter when a child is dead because of you. I ran. I was scared, drunk, and I ran like the coward I am. They caught me 3 days later. The boy's parents, their faces, Jacob's whole body convulsed with sobs now. I deserve this sack. I deserve worse. I deserve to never see light again. Emma thought about what Mama had said, about the danger, about the death of that child. But looking at this broken man, she didn't see a monster. She saw someone drowning in guilt and self-hatred so deep it seemed bottomless. The sack, Emma said quietly. Why do they make you wear it? Bishop Eli said, it's so I remember shame, so I can't see the world I don't deserve to be part of, so everyone can see me for the monster I am, without having to look at my face. That's cruel. It's mercy, Jacob corrected. The English judge wanted to give me 20 years in prison. This way I serve my time, make amends through work, and maybe, though I don't deserve it, maybe someday I can earn forgiveness. Not from the boy's family, never that, but maybe from God. Emma stood up slowly. My papa used to say that God's forgiveness is bigger than any sin. That's what makes it grace. Your papa was wrong about me, Jacob said bitterly. Some sins are too big even for grace. Papa was never wrong, Emma said with the absolute certainty of a child. She moved closer, and before Jacob could protest, she reached out and touched his hand, just her small fingers on his massive, calloused palm. Jacob jerked back, as if burned. Don't, your mama said. My mama is scared. She lost Papa and she's afraid of losing me too. But I'm not afraid of you, Jacob Miller. You should be. Why? Will you hurt me? Never. I would die first. Then there's nothing to be afraid of. Emma smiled, though he couldn't see it. Eat your food. Tomorrow you can start helping with the farm. The fence needs mending, the garden needs weeding, and the chicken coop needs cleaning. Can you do that? Ja, Jacob whispered. I can do that. I can work. It's all I'm good for now. Emma started to leave, then paused at the stall door. Jacob, the sack, does it hurt? It itches, and it's hard to breathe sometimes, but you don't deserve to suffer forever. Emma interrupted. What you did was terrible, but you're suffering for it. That should count for something. She left before he could respond, hurrying back across the darkening yard to the house. Through her bedroom window later, as she prepared for bed, she could see a dim light in the barn. Jacob had lit the small lantern she'd left for him. She wondered if he was eating, if he was praying, if he was crying. That night, Emma prayed harder than she ever had. She prayed for the little boy who died. She prayed for his parents. She prayed for Jacob and his drowning guilt. She prayed for her mama and her hardened heart. And she prayed that somehow, in some way, her one silver coin would purchase more than labor. It would purchase healing. In the barn, Jacob Miller knelt on the hard floor, the food untouched beside him. He had removed the sack just long enough to eat a few bites, but guilt had stolen his appetite. Now he prayed too, the same prayer he'd prayed every night since the accident. Forgive me, God. Forgive me. I don't deserve it, but forgive me. And please, please let that child be in heaven, whole and happy. Let him be playing somewhere with no pain, no fear. Take all the punishment and give it to me. I deserve it all. He put the sack back on, tied it tight and lay down in the straw. Through the rough fabric he could see the faint outline of stars through the barn's small window. Somewhere in the house, a little girl who should hate him had shown him kindness. It hurt worse than any punishment. Kindness, he'd learned, was the cruelest torture for the guilty. The first day of his 7-year sentence had ended. 2,555 days to go, but something had shifted, some small crack in the darkness. A 10-year-old girl with a silver coin had done what judges and bishops couldn't. She'd reminded him that somewhere, buried deep under the guilt and shame, there was still a human being worth saving. Whether he believed it or not, the rooster's crow pierced the morning silence at 4. Emma woke in her small bed, the quilt tangled around her legs, her mind immediately jumping to the barn. Was Jacob awake? Had he slept at all? Did he eat the food she brought him? She dressed quickly in her plain purple dress, pinned her apron, and carefully placed her white cap over her neatly braided hair. Downstairs she found Mama already in the kitchen, kneading dough with mechanical precision, her face as expressionless as a mask. "Good morning, Mama," Emma said softly. Sarah didn't look up. "There are eggs need collecting and Bessie needs milking. After breakfast you'll start on the garden weeding. I've already rung the bell for him." Emma glanced out the window. Sure enough, she could see Jacob's large silhouette emerging from the barn, moving slowly toward the well. Even from this distance, she could see the burlap sack still covering his head. "Mama, how is he supposed to work properly if he can't see well through that sack?" "He'll manage. The bishop says the sack stays on for the first year of his servitude. It's part of his punishment, his public shame." Sarah's hands worked the dough harder. "Now go do your chores." Emma collected the egg basket and stepped out into the cool morning air. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. She could hear Jacob at the well, the splash of water as he washed. She walked quietly toward the chicken coop, but her path took her near the well. "Good morning, Jacob," she called out. He froze, water dripping from his hands. "Morning, child." "You shouldn't." "Emma, my name is Emma, not child." A pause. "Morning, Emma." She smiled and continued to the chicken coop. The hens clucked their morning greetings, and Emma moved among them with practiced ease, gathering eggs into her basket. 13 eggs a good morning. As she worked, she kept glancing toward where Jacob stood by the well, waiting for his orders like a statue. Sarah appeared at the kitchen door. "You," she called to Jacob, her voice sharp. "The fence along the north pasture needs repair. Tools are in the small shed. Work until noon, then you can have water and bread. After noon, you'll clear the drainage ditch. Do you understand? Jar, Mrs. Yoder, and stay away from the house. Stay away from my daughter." Jacob nodded, his shoulders slumping further under the weight of those words. He walked toward the tool shed, his bare feet navigating the rough ground with care. Emma noticed how he stumbled occasionally, the limited vision from the sack making it difficult to see obstacles. After breakfast, oatmeal with brown sugar and fresh cream, Emma headed to the garden while Sarah began the laundry. The garden was indeed overgrown, weeds choking the vegetables that struggled to survive. Emma knelt in the dirt and began pulling weeds, but her attention kept drifting to the north pasture, where she could see Jacob working. Even from a distance, she could see the awkwardness of his movements. He would feel for the fence posts, locate the broken sections by touch, and work slowly to make repairs. It was taking him 3 times longer than it should, but he never stopped, never complained. His large frame bent over the fence line, working, always working. By mid-morning the sun was brutal. Emma could see Jacob swaying slightly, and she realized he probably couldn't see well enough to find shade when he needed it. She looked back at the house. Mama was inside, focused on the laundry. Emma made a decision. She filled a jar with cool water from the well, grabbed some bread and cheese from the kitchen while Mama's back was turned, and walked out to the north pasture. Her small feet moved quickly through the tall grass. "Jacob," she called when she was close enough. He straightened immediately, nearly dropping the hammer he'd been using. "Emma, you can't. Your mama said. You need water. It's too hot to work without drinking." She held out the jar. Jacob stood frozen, clearly torn between his desperate thirst and his orders to stay away from the girl. Emma could see his chest heaving with exertion beneath his torn shirt, could see sweat soaking through the burlap sack. "Please," Emma said, "just drink. I won't tell Mama." Slowly, trembling, Jacob reached for the jar. His large hands dwarfed it. He lifted the bottom of the sack just enough to expose his mouth and chin. Emma caught a glimpse of dark beard, cracked lips, and drank deeply. The water seemed to bring him back to life. "Thank you," he whispered, lowering the sack back in place. "You're kind like your papa was." Emma sat down in the grass, patting the ground beside her. "Take a rest. You've been working for 4 hours straight." "I can't," your mama said. "Mama's not here, and you'll work better if you rest a moment." Emma unwrapped the bread and cheese. "Besides, I wanted to ask you something." Jacob remained standing for a moment, then slowly, carefully, lowered himself to the ground, keeping a respectful distance from Emma. "What did you want to ask? Tell me about when you and Papa were boys. What was he like?" A sound came from under the sack, almost a laugh, but rusty as if laughter had been forgotten. "Your Papa? He was sunshine. Always smiling, always helping. We were 12 when we became friends. I was the biggest boy in school, got teased for it. Called me giant and monster. Your Papa, he was smaller than most boys, but he stood up for me. Said size didn't matter, that God made us all different for a reason." Emma smiled. "That sounds like Papa. We used to fish together in Miller's Creek. He'd talk about everything, about God, about life, about his dreams of having a family and a farm. He loved to make things grow. Could turn the poorest soil into a garden." Jacob's voice grew soft with memory. "He tried to stop me when I said I was leaving, said the English world would eat me alive. He was right." "What made you want to leave?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "My dad, your Papa's parents, were kind, loving. Mine were different. Dad believed in harsh discipline. Nothing I did was ever good enough. The bigger I grew, the more he seemed to hate it, like my size was a challenge to him. When I turned 18, I couldn't take it no more. I thought freedom was out there, in the English world." He laughed bitterly. "I was trading one prison for another. At least here, the chains are honest." "Is your dad still alive?" "No, died 5 years ago. Mama too. I got word while I was in Philadelphia. Didn't come home for the funeral. Didn't think I'd be welcome." Jacob's voice cracked. Another regret to add to the pile. Emma chewed on a piece of grass, thinking, "Jacob, when you wear that sack, can you see anything? Shapes, light and dark. Can't see faces, can't see details. It's like living in a fog." He paused. "But I don't deserve to see. Not after what I done." "Stop saying that." Emma's sudden passion surprised them both. "You made a terrible mistake. You hurt people. But you're not a mistake. God doesn't make mistakes when he makes people." "Emma, my Papa died in an accident too," Emma continued, her voice trembling. "The beam fell. Nobody meant for it to fall. It just did. Should we hate the barn? Should we put a sack over the barn's roof and call it a monster? That's different. The barn didn't choose, and neither did you choose to hurt that boy." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You chose to drink. Yes, you chose to drive. Those were wrong choices. But you didn't choose to kill anyone. That was an accident that happened because of your wrong choices. But you didn't want it. You didn't mean it. And you're sorry. I can hear how sorry you are." Jacob's shoulders shook stiff, silent sobs. Being sorry doesn't bring him back, doesn't heal his parents' hearts, doesn't change what I did. "No," Emma agreed softly, "but maybe it can change what you do next. Maybe that's what redemption is, not erasing the past, but building something better with the future." "You're 10 years old. How do you know such things?" "Papa taught me, and God teaches me too when I listen." Emma stood up, brushing grass from her dress. "I should get back before Mama notices. But Jacob, you're fixing that fence real good. Papa would be proud of the work." She started to walk away, then turned back. "And Jacob, just so you know, I don't see a monster when I look at you. I see someone who's lost and trying to find his way home. And there's nothing scary about that." Emma ran back toward the house, leaving Jacob sitting in the grass, trembling. Through the burlap sack, he could hear her footsteps fading, could hear the meadowlarks singing, could feel the sun on his shoulders. For the first time in 6 months, something warm uncurled in his chest. Not quite hope, but maybe its distant cousin. He stood, picked up his tools, and returned to work with renewed energy. Each fence post he repaired, he did with care, with attention to detail, not just because it was his duty, but because Emma had said her papa would be proud, and somehow that mattered more than any punishment or any chain. In the garden, Emma pulled weeds with fierce determination, her mind spinning. She had to find a way to help Jacob, not just with work but with healing. The sack was meant to shame him, but all it did was blind him to the beauty still left in the world. And how could anyone heal if they couldn't see light? That evening at supper, Sarah noticed Emma's thoughtful silence. "What's troubling you?" Emma considered lying, then decided on a version of truth. "Mama, I've been thinking about forgiveness." Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about it? How do we know when someone's forgiven? How do we know when they've suffered enough? Why are you asking this?" "Because," Emma chose her words carefully, "because Papa used to say that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I think maybe we're all drinking poison right now. Jacob with his guilt, us with our anger and fear, even that little boy's parents with their grief. When does it stop? When does the poison stop?" Sarah set down her fork, her eyes glistening. "Emma, that man killed a child. I know, Mama. I know it was terrible and wrong, and nothing can fix it. But making him suffer forever doesn't bring that child back either. It just means 2 lives are lost instead of 1. What would you have me do? Forgive him? Welcome him into our home?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "But maybe we could start by seeing him as a person instead of just his worst mistake. Papa always said everyone is more than their worst day." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Your papa's wisdom got him killed, Emma. His trusting nature, his kindness to everyone. It made him careless, made him volunteer for the most dangerous job at the barn raising. And now he's gone." The words hung in the air like bitter smoke. Emma stared at her mother, seeing clearly for the first time the real poison. Mama wasn't just angry at Jacob. She was angry at Papa for dying, for leaving them, for being too good for this harsh world. "Mama," Emma whispered, "Papa's death wasn't his fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was just terrible luck, a terrible accident. Go to your room, Emma." "Mama, now." Emma fled upstairs, tears streaming down her face. In her room, she pressed her face into her pillow and cried for Papa, for Mama, for Jacob, for the little boy who died, for everyone trapped in the cycle of pain and blame and unforgiveness. Outside in the barn, Jacob had finished his work. The fence was repaired, the ditch was cleared, and he had even, on his own initiative, repaired a loose board on the barn door. He sat in his stall, exhausted, every muscle aching, but it was good pain, honest pain. The pain of labor, not guilt. He thought about Emma's words, about not being his worst mistake. He wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw that bicycle, heard that terrible sound, saw the small body lying in the road. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the darkness, to the child he'd killed, to God, to anyone who might be listening. "I'm so sorry, and I'll spend every day of the rest of my life trying to earn the right to be forgiven, even though I know I never will." In the house, Sarah Yoder stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the barn. She watched the small light from Jacob's lantern, saw his shadow, moving in prayer. Part of her wanted to hate him, needed to hate him. It was easier than facing her own pain, her own guilt about resenting Daniel for dying, for leaving her alone. But Emma's words echoed in her mind. Everyone is more than their worst day. Was it possible? Could the man in the barn be more than a killer? Could he be what Emma saw, someone lost and trying to find his way home? Sarah didn't know, but as she turned from the window, she found herself whispering a prayer she hadn't prayed since Daniel died. God, show me what to do. Show me how to heal. Show me how to stop drinking poison. The moon rose over the Yoder farm, casting silver light across the fields. 3 broken people under one sky, each carrying wounds that seemed too deep to heal. But somewhere, in the mystery of faith and grace, seeds were being planted. Emma's silver coin had purchased a servant, but love, real, sacrificial love, might purchase something far more precious, redemption. The question was whether any of them had the courage to pay that price. 3 weeks passed, like water over stones, slow but constant, wearing away rough edges. Jacob worked from dawn until dusk, and the Yoder farm began to transform. The sagging barn door was repaired. The fence posts stood straight and strong. The drainage ditches ran clear. The garden, under Jacob's care during hours when Emma was supposed to be napping, flourished with vegetables that seemed to grow overnight. Sarah watched it all with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. The man worked like 3 men, never complaining, never asking for anything beyond water and the meager meals she left for him by the barn door. But she kept her distance, kept Emma away as much as possible, and kept the wall around her heart firmly in place. Emma, however, was not so easily constrained. She found ways to slip out to the barn, to bring Jacob extra food, to talk with him while he worked. She learned that he loved mathematics, that he could calculate board feet and angles in his head faster than most men could with paper. She learned that he sang hymns while he worked, old German hymns from their Amish heritage, his deep voice carrying across the fields like a prayer. She also learned that he woke screaming almost every night. It was a Thursday morning when everything changed. Emma woke to strange sounds coming from the barn, not screaming this time, but something worse, choking, gasping sounds that sent ice through her veins. She grabbed her shawl and ran downstairs, slipping out before Sarah could wake. The sun was just beginning to lighten the eastern sky, painting everything in shades of grey and pink. The barn door stood slightly ajar, and the terrible sounds were louder now. Jacob. Emma pushed through the door and ran to his stall. She found him collapsed on the ground, his massive body convulsing, his hands clawing at the burlap sack that covered his head. The sack had somehow twisted during the night, and the breathing holes were blocked. He was suffocating. Jacob, hold still. Emma's small hands fought with the rope that tied the sack, but it was knotted tight, swollen with moisture from his sweat and breath. His movements were becoming weaker, his gasps more desperate. Emma looked around frantically and spotted Jacob's work knife on the shelf. She grabbed it and began sawing at the rope, her hands shaking. Please, God, please, God, please. The rope finally gave way. Emma yanked the burlap sack off Jacob's head, and for the first time she saw his face. He gasped in huge lungfuls of air, his chest heaving, his eyes squeezed shut against the sudden light. Emma knelt beside him, her hand on his broad shoulder, feeling the tremors that ran through his body. Breathe, she said softly. Just breathe. You're okay. You're safe. Slowly, Jacob's breathing steadied, his trembling eased, and then, as if realizing what had happened, his eyes flew open in panic. Emma found herself looking into the deepest brown eyes she'd ever seen, eyes filled with pain and shame and fear, but also something beautiful, something human and real and alive. No, Jacob moaned, turning his face away. No, you can't see. I'm not supposed to. The bishop said. Jacob, look at me. I can't. The sack. I need the sack. Jacob Miller, look at me. Emma's voice held a strength that surprised them both. Slowly, reluctantly, Jacob turned to face her. His face was weathered, lined with hard years and harder choices. A thick beard covered his jaw, streaked with grey, though he was only 40. His nose had been broken at least once. A long scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheek, But none of that mattered to Emma. What mattered were his eyes, brown and deep, and filled with such overwhelming sorrow that it took her breath away. "You have kind eyes," Emma said simply. Jacob's face crumpled. "Kind? There's nothing kind about me. I'm a monster, a killer. I were a man," Emma interrupted. "A man who made terrible mistakes. A man who's sorry. A man who's trying. That's what I see. You shouldn't see me at all. The sack is my punishment, my shame." Bishop Eli said. Bishop Eli also said that we must show mercy as we hope to receive mercy. Emma countered. "That sack nearly killed you just now. What mercy is there in that?" Jacob sat up slowly, reaching for the discarded burlap. "I need to put it back on. If your mama sees, if anyone sees." Emma grabbed the sack before he could. "No, Emma, please. I can't. I don't deserve to see. Don't you understand? Every beautiful thing I see is stolen, is wrong, because that boy will never see anything again. So you should die too. Should you never breathe freely, never see a sunset, never look at another person's face? How does that honor that child's memory?" Jacob reached for the sack again, but Emma held it away. They stared at each other, the giant man and the small girl, locked in a battle of wills and mercy. "Emma Yoder, what is happening here?" They both froze. Sarah stood in the doorway of the barn, her face pale with shock, her eyes fixed on Jacob's uncovered face. Jacob immediately dropped his gaze to the floor, his shoulders hunching. "Miss Yoder, I'm sorry the sack got twisted in the night. I couldn't breathe. Emma saved my life, but I'll put it back on. Be quiet." Sarah's voice was sharp as a blade. She walked closer, her eyes never leaving Jacob's face. "Look at me." Jacob kept his eyes on the ground. "I can't, Mrs. Yoder. It's not proper. I'm not allowed." I said, "Look at me." Slowly, with obvious reluctance, Jacob raised his eyes to meet Sarah's. Emma watched her mother's face, saw the shock, the recognition, the confusion that played across her features. "I know you," Sarah whispered. "Ja, Mrs. Yoder, I was friends with your husband when we were boys. No, I mean, I've seen you before." "Recently," Sarah's brow furrowed. "At the market, 2 months ago, before the trial. You were in the crowd, watching from a distance. You were crying." Jacob's face paled. "I wanted to see the community one more time. Before everything. I saw you with Emma. I saw how sad you looked. And I knew my sins had rippled out, touching even those I'd never met with my poison." "What are you talking about?" "Your husband, Mrs. Yoder. Daniel, the barn raising." Jacob's voice broke. "That was my barn. I had hired the community to build it before I left for Philadelphia. I never canceled the job, never told them I wasn't coming back. They built it anyway, as a kindness. And when that beam fell," he closed his eyes, tears streaming down his scarred face. "It fell in my barn. Daniel died because I was too much a coward to face my community, to tell them I'd abandoned our ways. His death is my fault. Another death I carry." The barn fell silent except for the sound of mourning birds and Jacob's ragged breathing. Emma looked between her mother and Jacob, her heart pounding. Sarah stood perfectly still, processing this information. Then, to everyone's surprise, she laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Of all that you think, Daniel's death is your fault. Ja, if I had just..." "Stop." Sarah held up her hand. "Stop taking credit for things you didn't do. Yes, it was your barn. Yes, you left. But that beam fell because it was improperly braced. Because John Fisher rushed the work. Because Daniel was in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Because of 1,000 small things that had nothing to do with you." Jacob looked confused. "But you're so busy carrying guilt for everything that you can't see straight." Sarah's voice rose. "You carry the weight of that child's death, rightfully so. You made terrible choices that killed him. But now you're adding my husband's death, my loneliness, my daughter's grief. Where does it end, Jacob Miller? Will you carry responsibility for every sparrow that falls? I don't understand. Neither do I. Sarah threw her hands up. I don't understand how one man can carry so much guilt. I don't understand how my daughter can see good in you when I only see the man whose existence somehow led to my husband's death. I don't understand any of this. She turned toward the door, then stopped. But I do understand that Emma is right about one thing. That sack nearly killed you this morning. And whatever you deserve, whatever punishment is just, it can't be death by suffocation in my barn. Mrs. Yoder, the sack stays off. If Bishop Eli has a problem with that, he can take it up with me. You'll work without it. Sarah's voice was firm, final. But you still stay away from my daughter. You still sleep in the barn. You're still a servant working off your debt to society. Nothing else has changed. Understood, Jar? Mrs. Yoder, thank you. I don't thank me. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I can't have a dead man in my barn, and because my daughter would never forgive me if you suffocated on my watch. Sarah looked at Emma. You, inside. Now, we need to talk about sneaking out and interfering with things that don't concern you. Emma followed her mother out of the barn, but before she left, she turned back to Jacob. He sat in the straw, the morning light falling on his face for the first time in 6 months. He looked scared and vulnerable, and strangely hopeful. Jacob, Emma said softly, remember what I said. You have kind eyes. Don't hide them anymore. In the house, Sarah paced the kitchen while Emma sat at the table, waiting for the scolding she knew was coming. Do you understand how dangerous that was? Sarah finally said, going out there alone, in the dark with that man. He was dying, Mama. I couldn't let him die. He's not your responsibility. Then whose is he? Emma challenged. He's here because of me, because I bought him with Papa's coin. That makes him my responsibility. Sarah sat down heavily. You bought him as a worker, not as a project, not as someone to save. Maybe that's the same thing, Emma said quietly. Maybe everyone who works for us is someone to save. Maybe that's what Papa would have wanted, for us to see people, not just their usefulness. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Your Papa, he would have liked Jacob, would have seen past the sins to the man underneath. I wish I had his gift. You do, Mama. You just showed it. You let Jacob keep the sack off. I did that for practical reasons. Did you? Emma tilted her head. Or did you do it because seeing his face made him real to you? Made him a person instead of just a monster in your mind? Sarah stood abruptly. Get ready for the day. We have work to do. And Emma? Stay away from the barn unless I'm with you. I mean it. But as Sarah turned away, Emma saw something in her mother's face, a crack in the armor, a softening around the eyes. The poison of unforgiveness was still there, but maybe, just maybe, it was starting to lose its hold. In the barn, Jacob stood at the small window looking out at the farm for the first time in months, with his own eyes, not through burlap. The world was so much more vivid than he remembered, the green of the fields, the blue of the sky, the golden sunlight painting everything in warmth. He raised his hands to his face, touching the scars, the weathered skin, the evidence of hard years. He thought about Emma's words, you have kind eyes. Could eyes that had seen such terrible things, that had looked away from suffering, that had closed in drunken stupor while a child died, could such eyes still be kind? He didn't know, but for the first time in 6 months, he allowed himself to look in the small mirror he kept for shaving. The face that looked back was older, harder than he remembered. But in the eyes, those deep brown eyes, Emma had noticed, there was still something alive, something that wanted to be better, something that wanted to deserve the mercy a child had shown him. Help me, he whispered to the face in the mirror. To God, to whoever might be listening. Help me be the man that child thinks I am, not for me, but for her, for the trust she placed in me, for the coins she spent. Outside, the farm work continued, but something had shifted. some fundamental change in the atmosphere. Jacob worked without the sack, his face exposed to sun and wind. Sarah watched from the house, her feelings a tangled mess of anger and confusion and unwilling compassion. Emma moved between them like a small bridge, connecting two broken people with the simple faith that healing was possible. The chains of shame were beginning to break. The question was whether the chains of guilt and unforgiveness would break too, or whether they would tighten until no one could breathe. September arrived with cooler nights and the promise of harvest. Jacob had been with the Yoders for 6 weeks now, and the farm had never looked better. The fields yielded more than Sarah had expected. The animals were healthy and well tended, and repairs that had been neglected for months were completed with expert craftsmanship. Sarah found herself watching Jacob more than she intended. Without the sack, she could see the care he put into every task, the gentleness with which he handled the animals, the precision of his work. She saw him talking to Bessie the cow as he milked her, saw him carefully move a bird's nest before repairing the eaves, saw him leave the best vegetables from the garden on the back porch with a simple note, "For the table." She also saw the nightmares that still plagued him. Some nights his screams echoed across the yard, cries of, "I'm sorry," and "Please, no," that made her chest tighten with unwanted sympathy. She told herself she didn't care, that his suffering was his own fault, but the lies were getting harder to believe. Emma, meanwhile, had become Jacob's constant shadow whenever Sarah's back was turned. She helped him with chores, brought him books from the house, and talked to him about everything from scripture to the constellation. Jacob tried to maintain distance, tried to follow Sarah's rules, but Emma was as persistent as morning dew. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the fragile peace shattered. Emma was helping Jacob stack firewood for winter when a buggy rolled up the drive. Bishop Eli stepped down, his face stern, his presence commanding immediate attention. Behind him came Amos Beachy and 2 other elders from the church district. Sarah emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Bishop Eli, what brings you here?" The bishop's eyes were fixed on Jacob, who had immediately stopped working and stood with his head bowed in respect. "I heard concerning news, Sarah Yoder, news that the man under your care is no longer wearing the mark of his shame." Sarah's spine straightened. "The sack nearly killed him, Bishop. It twisted in the night and blocked his breathing. My daughter saved his life, but we decided it was too dangerous to continue its use." "Too dangerous?" Amos Beachy stepped forward, his face red with indignation. "What's dangerous is allowing a killer to walk around with his face exposed, as if he has any right to dignity." "Brother Amos," Sarah began. "The sack was part of his sentence," the bishop interrupted, his voice measured but firm. "Part of his public humiliation and reminder of his sins. By removing it, you undermine the judgment of both the English court and our community decision." Emma stepped forward, her small voice clear in the tense air. "But Jesus said, 'Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.' Where is the mercy in making someone wear a sack until they suffocate?" The bishop's eyes softened slightly as he looked at Emma. "Child, mercy and justice must walk together. This man's sins are grievous. I know what he did was wrong," Emma interrupted, her voice trembling but determined. "But he's sorry. He works hard every day. He prays every night. He's trying to be better. Isn't that what we want? Don't we want people to change?" "Change doesn't erase consequences," Amos said harshly. "The boy he killed is still dead. That boy's parents still grieve. What about justice for them?" Jacob, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "He's right." His voice was heavy with pain. "I should wear the sack. I should wear worse. What I did, nothing can ever make it right." "Jacob, no," Emma protested. "Mrs. Yoder tried to protect me," Jacob continued, his eyes on the ground. "Emma saved my life. But the bishop is right. I can't escape the consequences of my actions. If the sack is part of my sentence, then I should wear it, even if Even if it kills you. Emma's eyes filled with tears. That's not justice. That's murder. Emma, Sarah's sharp voice cut through. That's enough. This is a matter for adults to decide. But Mama, inside, now. Emma looked desperately between Jacob and her mother, tears streaming down her face. Please, Mama, please don't let them hurt him. No one is going to hurt anyone, Bishop Eli said gently. We are here to ensure God's will is done. And if God's will is that Jacob dies wearing that sack, Emma challenged, her voice breaking. If he suffocates again, then what? The question hung in the air like smoke. The bishop looked troubled, the other elders uncomfortable. Only Amos seemed unmoved, his face set in righteous certainty. Sarah took Emma's shoulders. Emma, go to your room. I won't let you. Emma Yoder, obey your mother. Sarah's voice was sharp, but her eyes were conflicted. Go, now. This is not your decision to make. Emma looked at Jacob one last time. His face was resigned, accepting, as if he'd already decided his fate. With a sob, Emma ran to the house, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. When the door slammed, Bishop Eli turned to Sarah. She's a good child, with a compassionate heart. But she's young and doesn't understand the full weight of justice. She understands more than you think, Sarah said quietly. Then, louder, Bishop, I am responsible for this man while he's under my care. If something happens to him because of that sack, it happens under my roof, in my barn. I will not have another death on this farm. The words seemed to surprise everyone, including Sarah herself. She pressed on, her voice gaining strength. You want to punish, he's punished. Every night he wakes, screaming. Every day he works until he can barely stand. Every moment he carries the weight of what he's done. Adding physical torture doesn't make that justice. It makes us cruel. Cruel, Amos sputtered. We're not the ones who killed a child. No, Sarah agreed. But we might be the ones who kill a man through our lack of mercy. And what will we say to God then? Bishop Eli studied Sarah with new interest. You've changed your position, Sarah Yoder. When the man first came here, you wanted nothing to do with him. I still don't, Sarah said honestly. But my daughter, she sees something in him I can't see. And she has her father's heart, pure and full of grace. Maybe her voice caught. Maybe she sees what God sees. Maybe we're all so focused on his worst moment that we can't see anything else. His worst moment killed a child, Amos insisted. Yes, Sarah acknowledged. And nothing we do will change that. But making him suffer more doesn't bring that child back. It just creates more suffering, more pain, more death. Where does it end? The bishop was quiet for a long moment, his hand stroking his long beard. Finally he turned to Jacob. What say you, Jacob Miller? Will you wear the sack again if we command it? Jacob stood silent, his large frame trembling slightly. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I will do whatever you ask, Bishop. I deserve the sack and more. I deserve to not exist. But he paused, struggling with his words. But if I'm being honest, wearing that sack makes me want to die. Every day in it I think about ending it all, about stopping the pain, about ceasing to be a burden and a reminder of evil. So you'd rather live in comfort than face your punishment? Amos demanded. No. Jacob's head shot up, his eyes fierce for the first time. I'd rather live to make amends. I'd rather work and pray and somehow, impossibly, try to do some good in this world to balance even a fraction of the evil I've done. I can't do that if I'm dead. And that sack, it's killing me, not just my body but my soul. It makes me forget that I'm human, that I was made in God's image, that maybe, just maybe, I could still serve some purpose beyond being an example of wickedness. The passion in his voice shocked everyone into silence. Jacob seemed shocked himself, as if he hadn't known those words were inside him. Bishop Eli's expression was unreadable. He looked from Jacob to Sarah to the house where Emma had disappeared, then back to Jacob. Tell me, Jacob Miller, the bishop said slowly, why did you accept servitude instead of prison? Because, Jacob's voice dropped, because in prison I'd be locked away, useless, just existing. Here, I could work. I could, maybe, help a family who needed help. I could contribute something, even if it could never be enough. And has that happened? Have you contributed? I've tried, Jacob said humbly. Mrs. Yoder's farm is better than when I came. The harvest will be good. The animals are healthy, but that's just work, just labor. It doesn't heal anything, doesn't it? Bishop Eli's question was gentle. Sarah, how has your farm fared with Jacob's help? Sarah hesitated, then spoke truthfully. The farm has thrived. Work that would have taken me years has been completed in weeks. We'll have food for winter and crops to sell. My daughter, she paused. My daughter smiles again. She has hope again, because she believes she helped save someone. And you, Sarah, what do you believe? Sarah met the bishop's eyes. I believe I don't know what I believe. I see a man who works hard, who's genuinely sorry, who's trying to atone, but I also see the man whose existence somehow brought death to my doorstep. I'm angry at him, angry at God, angry at myself for not being able to just forgive and move on like Emma does. I'm a mess of confusion, Bishop, but I know one thing. I don't want more death. I've had enough death. The bishop nodded slowly, then turned to his fellow elders. Brothers, what say you? The two men with him exchanged glances. One, an older farmer named Jonas, spoke up. The sack was meant to humble him, to remind him of his shame, but it seems he carries that shame without it. And if young Emma Yoder can show mercy, perhaps we should consider that God works through children to teach us. The other elder, Samuel, added, the boy's death was a tragedy, but adding another death through cruelty masked as justice, that sits poorly with me. Only Amos remained firm. This is weakness. The community decided. The community, Bishop Eli interrupted, did not decide on the sack. That was my suggestion, based on old ways of marking shame. But perhaps, he paused, choosing his words carefully, perhaps old ways are not always wise ways. Perhaps mercy can coexist with justice. He walked to Jacob, who stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe. The bishop placed his hand on Jacob's shoulder. Jacob Miller, you will continue your servitude without the sack, but know this, you are still shunned. You are still marked by your sins. The community will not welcome you, but neither will we add to your torment. Your work here, your genuine repentance, your efforts to atone, these will speak for themselves. In time, perhaps they will speak loud enough to begin the path back. But that time is not now. Jacob's knees nearly buckled with relief. Thank you, Bishop. I'll work hard. I know you will. The bishop turned to leave, then paused. And Jacob, that child you see in your nightmares, the one you killed. Honor his memory not by dying but by living well. Make your life count for something good, so his death wasn't completely meaningless. The bishop and his elders departed, leaving Sarah and Jacob standing in the yard. Amos left with a final glare of disapproval, but even his protests had grown quiet. When they were alone, Sarah spoke without looking at Jacob. You heard the bishop. You'll continue working. Nothing else has changed. Yes, Mrs. Yoder. Thank you for speaking on my behalf. I didn't do it for you, Sarah said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. I did it for Emma, and because I'm tired of death. She started toward the house, then stopped. That boy in your nightmares, what was his name? Jacob's voice broke. Timothy Morrison. He was 5 years old. He loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up. How do you know that? I went to his funeral, stood in the back where no one could see me. His father talked about him, about his dreams, about his smile. I memorized every word. I owe him that much, to remember not just how he died, but how he lived. Sarah nodded slowly. Remember him then, but also remember that you're alive. Emma was right about one thing. We can't change the past, but we can try to build a better future. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Jacob Miller, but maybe I can stop actively wishing you'd suffer. It wasn't much, but to Jacob, it felt like sunrise after endless night. In her room, Emma pressed her face against the window, watching as Jacob returned to work, and her mother went inside. The crisis had passed, but the emotions still swirled like storm clouds. She had been so scared that they'd force the sack back on, scared that Jacob would die, scared that her mother's heart would stay frozen forever. But something had shifted. She'd seen it in Mama's face, heard it in her voice. The ice was beginning to crack. Emma knelt by her bed and prayed, her young voice earnest in the quiet room. Thank you, God, for keeping Jacob safe. Thank you for softening Mama's heart, even just a little. Please keep working on us all. We're all so broken, God. Jacob and Mama and me and everyone, please help us heal. Please help us forgive. Please help us remember that your grace is bigger than any sin. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the corn stalks. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, not just in the sky, but in hearts still learning to let go of pain. But where there had been only darkness, now there was a crack of light, and light, however small, was enough to grow hope. October painted the Pennsylvania hills in shades of amber and crimson. The harvest was complete, the cellar stocked with vegetables for winter, and the Yoder farm stood prosperous, a testament to hard work, and whether Sarah would admit it or not, redemption. Jacob had been with them for 3 months now. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. His shoulders, once perpetually hunched in shame, occasionally straightened with quiet pride when he completed a task well. Emma's constant companionship had begun to heal something in him that punishment never could, the belief that he might still be worthy of kindness. Sarah remained distant, but no longer hostile. She had started leaving better food for Jacob, warm meals instead of just bread and water. She sometimes asked his opinion on farm matters, small gestures, but for Jacob, they were monumental. It was a crisp Saturday morning when everything changed. Emma was helping Jacob repair the chicken coop roof when a fancy car, a black sedan that gleamed despite the dusty road, pulled into the drive. A well-dressed English couple stepped out, the woman clutching the man's arm as if for support. Sarah emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Jacob immediately climbed down from the roof and moved to stand against the barn wall, making himself as invisible as possible. Emma watched as the couple approached her mother. The woman was crying. The man's face was set and hard. Even from a distance, Emma could feel the weight of their grief. "Are you Sarah Yoder?" the man asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Ja, I am. How can I help you?" The woman's eyes swept the farm until they landed on Jacob. Her whole body went rigid. "That's him. That's Jacob Miller." Jacob pressed himself harder against the barn wall, his face draining of color. "Yes," Sarah said carefully. "He works here. May I ask who you are?" "I'm Richard Morrison," the man said, "and this is my wife, Margaret. We're Timothy's parents." The words fell like stones into water, creating ripples that reached every corner of the farm. Emma's breath caught. Jacob made a sound like a wounded animal. Sarah's face went pale. "Timothy," Sarah whispered. The child who was murdered by that man," Margaret Morrison said, her voice breaking on the words. She took a step toward Jacob. "The child whose life was stolen by a drunk coward who ran away." Jacob slid down the barn wall until he was sitting in the dirt, his head in his hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, over and over. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" Margaret's voice rose to a scream. "Sorry? My baby is dead. My 5-year-old boy who was just riding his bicycle in our neighborhood is dead because of you. And you're sorry?" "Margaret, please." Richard tried to calm his wife, but she shook him off. "No, I want him to see what he's done. I want him to look at me and see a mother whose child was ripped away." She advanced on Jacob, her face twisted with rage and grief. "Do you know what it's like to bury your baby? Do you know what it's like to go into his room every morning and remember he'll never sleep there again? To see his toys and his clothes and his drawings and know that there will never be any more? Do you?" Jacob lifted his face, tears streaming down his scarred cheeks. No, I don't know your pain. I can't even imagine it. But I live every day knowing I caused it. I see Timothy's face every time I close my eyes. I hear the sound of the impact in my nightmares. I wish with everything in me that I could trade places with him, that I could give you back your son, but I can't. All I can do is say I'm sorry and know that it will never ever be enough. Margaret stared at him, her chest heaving with emotion. Then she collapsed to her knees sobbing. He wanted to be a paleontologist. Did you know? He had dinosaur books and plastic dinosaurs all over his room. He could name every species. He was so smart, so curious, so full of life. And you took that all away in 1 second of selfish, stupid drunk driving. I know, Jacob said, his voice raw. I went to his funeral. I heard everything your husband said about him. I memorized it all, because he deserves to be remembered. Your son deserves to be more than just the victim of my horrible mistake. Richard helped his wife to her feet, his own eyes red with unshed tears. We didn't come here for your apology. We came because we heard you were here, working instead of in prison. We wanted to see for ourselves what kind of justice this is. Sarah stepped forward. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I cannot imagine your... I lost my husband 3 months before Jacob came here, and even that grief feels like nothing compared to losing a child. I understand your anger. Do you? Margaret turned on her. Do you understand that every day I wake up and for 1 blessed second I forget he's gone? Then reality crashes in, and I have to lose him all over again. Do you understand that I hear other children laughing and I want to scream because my child will never laugh again? Do you understand that? No, Sarah said honestly. I don't, but I understand loss. And I understand that Jacob's suffering doesn't ease yours. Then why is he here? Richard demanded. Why are you giving him shelter and work and apparently kindness? He gestured to the farm. He should be rotting in a cell. Emma, who had been frozen in place, finally found her voice. Because everyone deserves a chance to be better. All eyes turned to her. Margaret's gaze was sharp, almost cruel. And who are you, little girl? I'm Emma Yoder. I'm the one who bought Jacob's servitude. You. Margaret's laugh was bitter. A child bought him. Yes, ma'am. With my papa's silver coin. Because Jesus said to love our enemies and pray for those who hurt us. Don't you dare quote scripture at me. Margaret's face flushed with fury. Don't you dare tell me to forgive the man who murdered my baby. I'm not telling you to forgive him, Emma said, her voice trembling but steady. I'm just saying that he's trying to be better, that he's sorry, that he works hard every day and prays for Timothy every night, that he wishes he could die instead of your son. I'm just saying that he's human and he's suffering too. Good, Margaret spat. I hope he suffers every second of every day for the rest of his miserable life. I hope he never knows peace, never knows joy, never knows anything but the agony he gave us. Margaret, Richard said softly, pulling his wife into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing. Over her head, he looked at Jacob, with eyes full of such pain that Emma felt her heart breaking. We came here for answers, Richard said quietly. We came here to understand how the man who killed our son could be living freely, working on a farm, instead of locked away. But I see now. I see that he's not free. He's in his own prison. That doesn't bring Timothy back. Margaret sobbed into her husband's chest. No, Richard agreed. Nothing will bring him back. Jacob stood slowly, his movements careful. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I know nothing I say can help, but I want you to know that I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to honor Timothy's memory. I will work hard. I will help others. I will try to do some good in this world so that his death wasn't completely meaningless. I know it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't change anything. But I owe your son that much. Margaret lifted her face from her husband's chest. You owe him more than that. You owe him his life. You owe him his future. You owe him everything you stole. You're right, Jacob said simply. I do, and I'll never be able to pay that debt. But I'll die trying. The Morrisons stood in the yard, grief radiating from them like heat from a fire. Emma watched them, seeing for the first time the true cost of Jacob's mistake, not just in abstract terms, but in flesh and blood, in a mother's tears and a father's broken heart. Finally, Richard spoke. We should go. We shouldn't have come. This doesn't help. Nothing helps. As they turned to leave, Margaret paused and looked at Emma. You seem like a sweet child, kind, full of faith. I was like you once, before. She closed her eyes. Be careful, little girl. The world is full of Jacob Millers, people who make selfish choices that destroy innocent lives. Don't let your kindness blind you to that. I won't, Emma said softly, but I also won't let fear and anger blind me to the fact that people can change, that they can be sorry, that they can try to be better. Margaret stared at her for a long moment, then shook her head. You're just a child. You don't understand. Maybe, Emma agreed, but maybe understanding isn't the same as knowledge. Maybe sometimes we understand things with our hearts that our minds can't accept yet. The Morrisons left without another word, their car kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. The silence they left behind was deafening. Jacob hadn't moved from where he stood. He seemed frozen, his face a mask of anguish. Sarah watched him with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. Jacob, Sarah said finally, are you all right? He laughed, a broken, terrible sound. All right, how could I be all right? Did you see them? Did you see what I did to them? We saw, Sarah said, and it was terrible. But Jacob, no. Jacob's voice cracked. No more kindness, no more mercy.
Papa, Emma whispered to the stars, to heaven, to wherever her father might be. Did I do the right thing? Buying Jacob? Trying to help him? Mrs. Morrison said, I was used to a child who didn't understand, and maybe she's right. Maybe I don't understand. But my heart says that everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Was I wrong? No answer came, of course. Just the whisper of wind and the distant call of an owl. But in her heart, Emma felt a peace that passed understanding. She had done what her father would have done, shown mercy when others showed judgment, chosen grace when others chose condemnation. Whether it was right or wrong, she had chosen love. And love, her papa always said, was never wrong, even when it was costly, even when it hurt, even when the world didn't understand. The weeks following the Morrisons' visit were different. The air on the Yoder farm felt heavier, as if weighted with the truth of what Jacob had done. Not abstract anymore, but real and devastating. Jacob worked harder than ever, pushing himself until exhaustion claimed him each night. He spoke less, ate less, seemed to be fading despite his large frame. Emma watched him with growing concern. Sarah noticed too. One evening, as she prepared supper, she made an unexpected decision. She prepared an extra plate, not scraps or leftovers, but a full meal, and instead of leaving it by the barn door, she carried it out herself. Jacob was mucking out the stalls when she entered. He froze, immediately setting down his tools. Mrs. Yoder, is something wrong? Yes, Sarah said simply. You're killing yourself with guilt, and I won't have another death on this farm. She held out the plate. This is supper, real supper, not scraps. And you're going to eat it while it's hot. Jacob stared at the plate like it might bite him. I can't. After what you saw, after the Morrisons' grief is real and justified, Sarah interrupted. But so is your humanity. You can carry guilt and still eat a proper meal, Jacob. He took the plate with trembling hands. Why are you doing this? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Because Emma asked me a question the other night. She asked if I wanted you to die. And I realized, I don't. I did once, but not anymore. I don't know if I've forgiven you for existing, for the barn that brought Daniel's death, for any of it. But I know that adding your death to the ledger won't heal anything. Jacob's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve this kindness. Maybe not, Sarah agreed. But maybe that's what makes it grace. She turned to leave, then paused. Jacob, that boy, Timothy, you honor his memory better by living well than by dying slowly. Remember that. From that day forward, things shifted subtly. Sarah still maintained distance, still kept rules, but the harshness had softened. She began to eat meals with Jacob present, not at the same table, but in the same space. Small steps, but significant ones.
Emma blossomed with the change. She spent her days helping both her mother and Jacob, bridging the gap between them with her natural joy and faith. She told stories, sang hymns, and slowly the Yoder farm began to feel less like a place of servitude and more like something else. Something almost like family. One November afternoon, as the first snow began to fall, Emma convinced Sarah to let Jacob come inside to repair the kitchen table that had been wobbling for months. "He'll track mud," Sarah protested weakly. "He'll take off his boots." Emma countered. "And Mama, it's starting to snow. He can't work outside in this weather." Sarah relented. Jacob entered the house for the first time, moving carefully as if afraid he might contaminate something sacred. He repaired the table in silence, his large hands gentle with the old wood. Emma chatted the entire time, telling him about the book she was reading, asking him questions about carpentry, filling the silence with her bright presence. Sarah listened from the kitchen, hearing Jacob's deep voice respond with increasing warmth as Emma drew him out. "You're good at this," Emma said, watching him work. "Papa would have liked learning from you." Jacob's hands stilled. "Your papa was the one who taught me basics, actually, when we were boys. He was patient, always encouraging." "Tell me about him," Emma said. "Tell me something I don't know." Jacob smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "Your papa once convinced me to help him rescue a baby raccoon that had fallen from a tree. We nursed it for weeks, until it was strong enough to release." His mother was so angry about having a wild animal in the house, but Daniel just smiled and said all of God's creatures deserved kindness. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression soft. "I never knew that story." Jacob looked up, startled. "Mrs. Yoder, I'm almost finished." "It's all right. I was just thinking Daniel would have liked knowing you came back, that you're trying to make amends. Do you really think so?" Jacob's voice was tentative, hopeful. "Yes," Sarah said. And then, surprising herself, she added, "And I think maybe I'm beginning to understand why Emma bought you. Not just for the work, but because everyone deserves a chance to come home." The words hung in the air like the snowflakes outside, delicate, beautiful, transformative. That night, for the first time, Sarah invited Jacob to join them for evening prayers. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure, but Emma pulled him in with her small hand in his large one. They knelt together, widow, orphan, and broken man, and prayed. Sarah's voice was steady as she thanked God for the harvest, for their health, for Emma's wisdom. Then she paused and quietly added, "And thank you for sending us help when we needed it, even when we didn't recognize it as such." Jacob's shoulders shook with silent tears. As winter deepened, the Yoder farm became an island of unexpected grace. Jacob's nightmares grew less frequent. Sarah's smiles came more easily. Emma's faith seemed validated by the slow transformation she witnessed. But healing is never a straight line, and forgiveness is never simple. The snow continued to fall, covering the farm in white, a blank page waiting to be written upon with whatever story they chose to create. A story of redemption, or maybe just a story of three broken people, learning that mercy was stronger than judgment, that grace was more powerful than guilt, and that love, even when costly, was always worth the price. Christmas Eve arrived with a gentle snowfall that blanketed the Yoder farm in pristine white. Inside the warm kitchen, Sarah prepared a modest feast, while Emma decorated with pine boughs and candles. For the first time since Daniel's death, the house felt alive with something more than grief. Jacob had been with them for 5 months now. The 7-year sentence stretched ahead still, but something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer just a servant working off debt. He had become part of the fabric of their lives. That evening, as Sarah set the table, she did something that made Emma's heart soar. She placed 3 settings instead of 2. "Jacob's eating with us tonight," Sarah said simply. "It's Christmas Eve. No one should be alone." When Jacob entered, cleaned and nervous, he stopped at the threshold. "Mrs. Yoder, I don't think..." Sit, Sarah commanded gently. It's Christmas. Even broken people deserve to celebrate the birth of grace. They ate in comfortable silence, broken by Emma's chatter about the snow and Christmas traditions. After the meal, Sarah stood and retrieved something from the cupboard, a small wooden box. "Emma," she said softly, "do you remember the silver coin you used to buy Jacob's servitude?" Emma nodded, confused. Sarah opened the box, and there, gleaming in the candlelight, was the coin. "Peter Stoltzfus returned it to me last month. Said it didn't feel right keeping it, knowing what it meant to you." Emma's eyes widened. "Mama, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was angry. I wanted to keep it from you, to somehow reverse what you'd done." Sarah's voice trembled. "But tonight, I understand what this coin really purchased. It wasn't just Jacob's labor." She placed the coin in Emma's small hand. "It purchased hope. It purchased healing. It purchased the chance for all of us to learn what grace really means." Jacob stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "I should go." "Sit down, Jacob," Sarah said, her voice firm but kind. "I have something to tell you both." They sat, Emma clutching the coin, Jacob trembling. "I've been writing letters," Sarah began, "to the Morrisons. Not asking for anything, just sharing, telling them about Jacob's work, his genuine remorse, his nightmares, about how he prays for Timothy every night, about how he's trying to honor their son's memory by living better." Jacob's face went pale. "Mrs. Yoder, you had no right." "I had every right," Sarah interrupted. "They deserved to know that their son's death, horrible as it was, led to something. Not redemption. That's not mine to grant, but change. Real, genuine change." She pulled out a letter. "Margaret Morrison wrote back last week." The room fell silent, except for the crackling fire. Sarah's hands shook as she read. "Mrs. Yoder, your letters have been both painful and something else. Healing, perhaps, though I hate to use that word. Knowing that Jacob Miller suffers, that he remembers Timothy, that he's trying to be better. It doesn't bring my son back, but it does mean his death wasn't completely meaningless. My husband and I have talked, prayed, cried. We will never forgive what happened, but we can acknowledge that Jacob Miller is paying for his sins, not just with labor but with genuine remorse. Tell him that we hope he finds peace someday, not for his sake but for Timothy's, because our son had the kindest heart and he wouldn't want anyone to suffer forever, even the man who killed him." Jacob's face crumpled. He buried it in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from his very soul. Emma moved to him, placing her small hand on his massive shoulder. "Jacob, do you understand? They're releasing you from part of your guilt. They're choosing mercy." "I don't deserve it," Jacob sobbed. "I don't deserve any of this." "No one deserves grace," Sarah said softly. "That's what makes it grace. I didn't deserve Daniel's love, but he gave it anyway. Emma didn't deserve to lose her father, but grief came anyway. You don't deserve forgiveness, but mercy arrives anyway. That's how God works." She stood and walked to Jacob, placing her hand on his other shoulder. "Jacob Miller, I cannot speak for the Morrisons. I cannot erase what you did, but I can tell you this. You are no longer just a servant in my home. You are a man trying to be better, and that's enough for me." Jacob looked up, tears streaming down his scarred face. Why would you show me such kindness?" Sarah's own eyes filled with tears. "Because my daughter, with the wisdom God grants to children, taught me that we're all broken. We're all in need of grace. And sometimes, the people we think are our burdens turn out to be our blessings." Emma began to cry too, her small frame shaking with the enormity of the moment. The three of them stood together in the candlelight, broken, imperfect but somehow complete. "I have another confession," Sarah said quietly. "I spoke with Bishop Eli about reducing your servitude." Jacob's head snapped up. "What? You've worked harder than 3 men. You've shown genuine repentance. You've become—" Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. You've become important to us, to this family. The bishop agreed that if you choose to stay, it should be as a hired hand, not a servant. A man with wages and dignity, not chains and shame. I don't understand. Emma jumped up, her face radiant. You can stay, Jacob. Not because you have to, but because you want to. You can be free. Jacob looked between them, disbelief warring with hope on his weathered face. But the 7 years can be commuted, Sarah finished. If you choose freedom, if you choose to leave, start fresh somewhere else, we won't stop you. You've paid your debt to us 100 times over. And if I choose to stay, Sarah smiled, a real, genuine smile, then you stay as family, as the man who helped us heal, who worked our farm, who became part of our lives. The choice is yours, Jacob. For the first time in months, the choice is yours. Jacob stood slowly, his large frame unfolding. He looked at Emma, at her shining face full of faith and love. He looked at Sarah, at the acceptance in her eyes. He looked around the warm kitchen, at the home that had become his redemption. I choose to stay, he whispered. If you'll have me, I choose this farm, this family, this chance to be better. I choose grace. Emma launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Jacob hesitated, then carefully, gently, hugged her back, the first embrace he'd allowed himself in over a year. Sarah joined them, and for a moment, they stood in a circle of broken people choosing to heal together. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering old scars with new white. The silver coin gleamed in Emma's hand, no longer a currency of servitude, but a symbol of redemption purchased with love. Emma looked at the coin, then at Jacob. Papa said to spend this on something special, something that speaks to my heart. I thought I was buying a servant, but I really bought a family, didn't I? No, child, Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion. You bought something far more precious. You bought hope for a man who thought he was beyond saving. You bought proof that grace is real. You bought evidence that God hasn't given up on even the worst of us. Then it was the best purchase I ever made, Emma declared. Sarah laughed through her tears. The best purchase any of us ever made. As they returned to the table for Christmas Eve prayers, the candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. 3 voices joined in ancient words, speaking of peace and redemption, of light coming to darkness, of hope born in the most unlikely places. Years later, people would talk about the Yoder farm and the miracle that happened there, how a widow found healing, how a child's faith moved mountains, how a broken man found redemption. But those who lived it knew the truth was simpler and more profound. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about one small girl with a silver coin choosing mercy over judgment. About a mother learning that letting go of anger didn't mean betraying her grief. About a man discovering that his worst moment didn't have to define his entire existence. The silver coin sat on the mantel after that night, not spent but saved, not as a reminder of what it purchased, but as a symbol of what it taught, that grace costs everything and nothing, that forgiveness is possible even when it seems impossible, and that love, real, sacrificial, challenging love, can redeem even the most broken among us. Jacob Miller stayed with the Yoders. He became the father Emma never expected to have again, the companion Sarah learned to love in a different way than she'd loved Daniel. He lived the rest of his days honoring Timothy Morrison's memory, not through death, but through life lived fully, generously, and well. And every Christmas Eve they would gather around the same table, say the same prayers, and thank God for the gift of redemption, purchased not with gold or silver, but with the far more precious currency of grace. The little Amish girl had paid 1 silver coin for a giant mountain man with a sack on his head at the market. But what she really purchased was proof that no one is beyond saving, that mercy triumphs over judgment, and that sometimes the greatest investments we make are in broken people who just need someone to believe they can be whole again.